Good morning students. Today we are going to see about the next part of the cardiovascular system, the distribution of blood and also the mechanisms involved in the distribution of blood and about hemodynamics. First let us see about the distribution of blood. This particular picture shows the distribution of the blood in the cardiovascular system when a person is at rest. The largest portion of the blood volume at rest is about 65% that is present in the systemic veins and venules. This is called as the blood reservoir of the body. About 13% of the blood is present in the arteries and arterioles, 7% in the systemic capillaries, 7% by the heart and 9% by the pulmonary vessels. Systemic veins and venules contain about 64% of the blood and they act as blood reservoir from which blood can be diverted into any other area which is in need of the blood. During increased muscular activity, the cardiovascular center of the brain sends signals to the sympathetic impulses to the veins. So this will result in venoconstriction, that is the constriction of the veins, which reduces the volume of blood in the reservoir and allow a greater volume of blood to flow to the skeletal muscles where it is needed during the increased muscular activity. A similar mechanism can operate in the case of hemorrhage when blood volume and blood pressure decreases. In such case, the venoconstriction helps counteract the drop in the blood pressure. The veins of the abdominal organs, especially the liver and the spleen, and the veins of the skin are the principal blood reservoirs of the blood. Now let us discuss about the capillary exchange, the pressures involved in the movement of the fluids between capillaries and interstitial spaces. Substances enter and leave the capillaries by three basic mechanisms. They are diffusion, transcytosis and bulk flow, which involves filtration and reabsorption. Diffusion is one of the most important method of capillary exchange and many substances such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, glucose, amino acids and hormones enter and leave the capillaries by simple diffusion. Oxygen and nutrients normally are present in higher concentration in the blood. They are the nutrients which should be given to the transported to the cells. They diffuse down the concentration gradient and into the interstitial fluid and then into the body cells, whereas the carbon dioxide and other wastes are released by the body cells and they are collected by the interstitial fluid and then transmitted to the capillaries. So they are present in higher concentration in the interstitial fluid, so they diffuse into the blood. The to and fro movement of the substances across the capillary wall takes place by simple diffusion. Substances in the blood capillaries or the interstitial fluid can cross the wall of the capillary by diffusing through the intercellular cleft or fenestrations or by diffusing through the endothelial cells. You can see the fenestrations or pores present in the capillary walls which enable the movement of the substances across the capillary wall. Water-soluble substances such as glucose and amino acids pass across the capillary walls through intercellular clefts or fenestrations. Lipid-soluble materials such as oxygen, carbon dioxide and steroid hormones also pass across the capillary wall directly through the lipid bilayer of endothelial cell plasma membrane. In this picture, you can see three types of capillaries which enable in the diffusion of substances. Number one is the continuous capillary formed by the endothelial cells. Number two is the fenestrated capillary and number three are sinusoids. Most of the plasma proteins and red blood cells cannot pass through the capillary walls of continuous and fenestrated capillaries because they are too large to fit through the intercellular clefts and fenestrations. Whereas in the sinusoids, the intercellular clefts are so large that they allow even the passage of proteins and blood cells through their walls. For example, hepatocytes or liver cells synthesize and release many plasma proteins like fibrinogen, which is a very important protein in the clotting factor, and albumin, which diffuse into the bloodstream through the sinusoids. In red bone marrow, blood cells are formed by hemopoiesis and they also enter the bloodstream through sinusoids. Whereas the capillaries of the brain allow only a few substances to move across their wall because they have a blood-brain barrier. Most of the areas of the brain contain continuous capillaries. These capillaries are very tight. The endothelial cells of most of the brain capillaries are sealed together by tight junctions. So, this will result in the blockage of the movement of materials into and out of the brain capillaries. This is known as the blood-brain barrier. In brain areas that does not contain the blood-brain barrier, for example, the hypothalamus, pineal gland, the pituitary gland, materials undergo capillary exchange more freely than the regions where it contains a blood-brain barrier. The second mechanism by which the substances are exchanged through the capillaries is transcytosis. A small quantity of the material crosses the capillary wall by this process called as transcytosis. That is, here in this process, the substances in the blood plasma will become enclosed with tiny vesicles called as pinocytic vesicles. So they get enclosed within the pinocytic vesicles, which will first enter the endothelial cells by endocytosis. Then they move across the cell and exit on the other side by exocytosis. So three different processes are involved: pinocytosis, endocytosis and exocytosis. So this method is very important for the transport of large lipid insoluble molecules that cannot cross the capillary walls by way of diffusion. For example, the hormone insulin enters the bloodstream by transcytosis, and also some proteins like the antibodies pass from the maternal circulation into the fetal circulation by transcytosis. The third mechanism is bulk flow. Bulk flow is a passive process in which large number of ions, molecules or particles in a fluid move together in the same direction. The substances move at rate far greater than the diffusion or transcytosis. Bulk flow actually occurs from an area of higher pressure to an area of lower pressure. As long as the pressure difference exists, the flow continues in one direction. The solute exchange between the blood and the interstitial fluid takes place by the process called as diffusion, whereas the bulk flow is very important for the regulation of the relative volumes of the blood and the interstitial fluid. The bulk flow is of two types. One is filtration and the other one is reabsorption. So pressure driven movement of fluid and solutes from the blood capillaries into the interstitial fluid is called as filtration. Pressure driven movement from interstitial fluid into the blood capillaries is called as reabsorption. There are two pressures that promote the filtration. Number one is the blood hydrostatic pressure. This is the pressure generated by the pumping action of the heart, and then the other one is the interstitial fluid osmotic pressure. The main pressure promoting reabsorption of fluid is called as the blood colloid osmotic pressure. The balance of these pressures is called as the net filtration pressure. This determines whether the volume of the blood and the interstitial fluid remains steady or change. According to the Starling's law of capillaries, the volume of the fluid and solute reabsorbed is almost equal to the volume filtered. So there is a net balance between the hydrostatic pressure and the osmotic pressure. So we have seen the different kinds of pressure that will affect the filtration process. One is the blood hydrostatic pressure, the other one is the interstitial fluid osmotic pressure, blood colloid osmotic pressure and net filtration pressure. The pressure that is exerted by the water in the blood plasma against the blood vessel wall is called as the blood hydrostatic pressure, BHP. The BHP or the blood hydrostatic pressure is about 35 mm mercury at the arterial end of the capillary and about 16 mm mercury at the venous end of the capillary. The blood hydrostatic pressure actually pushes the fluid out of the capillaries into the interstitial fluid. Now the opposing pressure of the interstitial fluid is called as the interstitial fluid hydrostatic pressure, IFHP. This pushes the fluid from the interstitial spaces back into the capillaries. However, the IFHP is close to zero. Because the IFHP is difficult to measure and the reported values may vary from a small positive value to a small negative value. So we assume that this pressure is equal to 0 millimeter mercury throughout the capillaries. Now the proteins play a very important role in the pressure. So the difference in the osmotic pressure across the capillary wall is because of the presence of the plasma proteins in the blood. They are very large to pass through the fenestrations or holes or the pores or gaps between the endothelial cells. Blood colloid osmotic pressure, which is called as BCOP, is a force caused by the colloidal suspension of these large proteins in the plasma. So this BCOP, blood colloid osmotic pressure, averages around 26 millimeter mercury in most capillaries. So the effect of the BCOP is to pull the fluid from the interstitial spaces into the capillaries. The force which is opposing the BCOP is the interstitial fluid osmotic pressure, IFOP. This pulls the fluid out of the capillaries into the interstitial fluid. Normally the IFOP is very small, about 0.1 to 5 millimeter mercury, because only tiny amounts of proteins are present in the interstitial fluid. The small amount of protein that leaks from the blood plasma into the interstitial fluid does not accumulate there because it passes into the lymph and into the lymphatic capillaries and eventually return to the blood. So the average value of IFOP is about 1 millimeter mercury. So during bulk flow, the fluid will either enter the capillaries or they leave the capillaries. So whether the fluid leave the capillaries or enter the capillaries, it depends upon the balance of the pressures, the net balance of the pressures. If the pressure that push the fluid out of the capillaries exceeds the pressure that pull fluid into the capillaries, fluid will move from the capillaries into the interstitial spaces, and this will lead to filtration. If the pressures that push the fluid out of the interstitial space into the capillaries exceed the pressure that pull the fluid out of the capillaries, then the fluid will move from interstitial space into the capillaries. This will result in reabsorption. So the net filtration pressure is the direction of the movement of the fluid. So the net filtration pressure is calculated as the pressure that promotes filtration minus the pressure that promotes reabsorption. So what are the pressures that promote filtration? BHP and IFOP. These are the pressures that promote filtration. So BHP plus IFOP minus the pressures that promote reabsorption, BCOP plus IFHP. The net filtration pressure at the arterial end of the capillary is 10 millimeter mercury, and the net filtration pressure at the venous end of the capillary is 9 millimeter mercury. At the arterial end of the capillary, there is a net outward pressure of 10 millimeter mercury, and the fluid moves out of the capillaries into the interstitial spaces, and it will lead to filtration. At the venous end of the capillary, the negative value minus 9 millimeter mercury represents a net inward pressure, and the fluid moves into the capillaries from tissue spaces, which will result in reabsorption. On an average, about 85% of the fluid filtered out of the capillaries is reabsorbed. Every day, about 20 liters of fluid filter out of the capillaries and tissues throughout the body. The excess fluid that is filtered and the few plasma proteins that escape from the blood into the interstitial fluid enters the lymphatic capillaries. Out of the 20 liters of fluid that is filtered out of the capillaries, about 17 liters are reabsorbed and 3 liters enter the lymphatic capillaries. Edema is a clinical condition where there is an abnormal increase in the interstitial fluid volume. So if the filtration greatly exceeds reabsorption, it will result in the swelling called as edema. It is usually not detectable in the tissues until the volume of the interstitial fluid rises above 30% above normal. So edema can result either from excess filtration or inadequate reabsorption. The capillary pressure plays a very important role in the filtration. Increased capillary blood pressure causes more fluid to be filtered from the capillaries. Increased permeability of capillaries raises the interstitial fluid osmotic pressure by allowing some plasma protein to escape. So this leakiness may be caused by the destructive effects of chemicals, bacteria and other thermal or mechanical agents which will act upon the capillary walls. Now let us see about hemodynamics. What are the factors that affect the blood flow? What are the factors that regulate the volume of blood flow, and what are the blood pressure changes that is taking place throughout the cardiovascular system? And we will see about the mean arterial pressure and the systemic vascular resistance and the relationship between the cross-sectional area and the velocity of blood flow. What is blood flow? Blood flow is the volume of blood that flows through any tissues in a given period of time. Say for example, per minute, ml per minute. Total blood flow is the cardiac output, CO. That is the volume of the blood that circulates through the systemic or pulmonary circulation, that is the each minute. The cardiac output depends on the heart rate and the stroke volume. CO is equal to HR into SV. The cardiac output becomes distributed into the circulatory routes that are present on the body tissue. The cardiac output depends upon two factors. Number one is the pressure difference that drives the blood flow through a tissue, and number two is the resistance to the blood flow in specific blood vessels. How does the blood flow? The blood flows from a region of higher pressure to a region of lower pressure. The greater the pressure difference, the greater is the blood flow or the rate of blood flow. But higher the resistance, the smaller is the rate of blood flow. What is blood pressure? Blood pressure is the hydrostatic pressure exerted by the blood on the walls of a blood vessel. The contraction of the ventricles generates blood pressure or BP. The blood pressure depends upon three factors. One is the cardiac output, the other one is the blood volume, and the third one is the vascular resistance. In a resting young adult, the blood pressure is highest in the aorta and large systemic arteries. It rises to about 110 mm mercury during the systole and drops to around 70 mm mercury during diastole. Systolic blood pressure is the highest pressure attained in arteries during the systole or ventricular contraction, and diastolic blood pressure is the lowest arterial pressure during the diastole or ventricular relaxation. This picture shows the blood pressure in various parts of the cardiovascular system. That is the aorta, arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, veins, and vena cava. As the blood leaves the heart through the aorta and flows through the systemic circulation, its pressure falls progressively as the distance from the left ventricle increases. Blood pressure decreases to about 35 mm mercury as blood passes from the systemic arteries through the systemic arterioles and into the capillaries, where the pressure fluctuation disappear. At the venous end of the capillary, blood pressure has dropped to about 16 mm mercury. Blood pressure still continues to drop as the blood enters the systemic veins and then veins because these vessels are farthest from the left ventricle. Finally, the blood pressure reaches 0 mm mercury as the blood flows into the right ventricle. Mean arterial pressure MAP is the average blood pressure in the arteries. It is roughly 1/3 of the way between the diastolic and the systolic pressure. The mean arterial pressure in a person whose BP is 110 by 70 mm mercury is about 83 mm mercury. The cardiac output is based on the heart rate and the stroke volume. If the cardiac output rises due to the increase in the stroke volume or heart rate, then the mean arterial pressure also rises as long as the resistance remains steady. Similarly, a decrease in the cardiac output causes a decrease in mean arterial pressure if resistance does not change. The blood pressure in the body also depends on the total volume of the blood in the cardiovascular system. The normal volume of blood in an adult is about 5 liters. Any decrease in the volume of the blood, for example from hemorrhage, will decrease the amount of blood that is circulating through the arteries each minute. Similarly, if there is any increase in the blood volume because of water retention in the body, this will increase the blood pressure. So, blood pressure depends upon the blood volume. The second factor is the vascular resistance. Vascular resistance is the opposition to blood flow because of the friction between the blood and the walls of the blood vessels. Vascular resistance depends on the size of the blood vessel, the blood viscosity, and the total blood vessel length. Number one is the size of the lumen. The resistance is directly proportional to the size of the lumen. Resistance is inversely proportional to the fourth power of the diameter of the blood vessel lumen. That is, the smaller the diameter of the lumen of the blood vessel, the greater is the resistance to blood flow. If the diameter of the blood vessel is decreased by 1/2, the resistance of the blood flow increases 16 times. So vasoconstriction narrows the lumen or the diameter of the blood vessel, and vasodilation widens the blood vessel. When the arterioles dilate, the resistance decreases and the blood pressure falls. When the arterioles constrict, the resistance increases and the blood pressure rises. The second factor that affects the vascular resistance is the viscosity of the blood. The viscosity of the blood or the thickness of the blood depends on the ratio of the red blood cells to the volume of the plasma and also to the concentration of the proteins in the plasma. The higher the viscosity of the blood, the higher is the resistance and there is an increase in the blood pressure. So any condition that increases the viscosity of the blood, for example dehydration or polycythemia, that is a high number of RBC, will cause more resistance to the blood flow and increases the blood pressure. Similarly, a depletion of plasma proteins or the red blood cells because of the hemorrhage or anemia decreases viscosity and also decreases the blood pressure. The third factor that affects the vascular resistance is the total length of the blood vessel. So there is a resistance of blood flow through the vessel and this resistance is directly proportional to the length of the blood vessel. The longer the blood vessel, the greater is the resistance, and this you can see in obese people. Obese people have very often they have an elevated blood pressure or hypertension because the additional blood vessels which are present in the adipose tissues increase their total length of the blood vessel. And this will develop additional blood vessels for each extra kg of fat. All the vascular resistance offered by the systemic blood vessel is called as the systemic vascular resistance, SVR, and this is also known as total peripheral resistance, TPR. The resistance of the offered by the arteries and veins are very less because the diameters of the arteries and the veins are very large. So the resistance becomes very small, and because the blood does not come into physical contact with the walls of the blood vessels. Whereas the smallest blood vessels like the arterioles, capillaries and venules contribute to the high resistance of the blood flow. The systemic vascular resistance is actually controlled by the arterioles. The arterioles also control the blood pressure and the blood flow to a particular tissues. So they do this by changing the diameter by either vasoconstriction or vasodilation. This systemic vascular resistance is actually regulated by the vasomotor center in the brainstem. The volume of the blood flowing back to the heart through the systemic vein is called as the venous return. So they occur due to the pressure generated by the contractions of the left ventricle of the heart. The pressure difference between the venules and the right ventricle is very small, and this pressure is sufficient enough to cause the venous return of the heart. Apart from the heart, there are two other mechanisms or pumps, that is which will help in the pumping of the blood from the lower part of the body to the heart. That is, number one is the skeletal muscle pump and number two is the respiratory pump. So both the pump depends on the presence of valves in the vein. So this picture shows the action of the skeletal muscle pump in returning the blood to the heart. So there are two valves in the skeletal muscle pump. One is the proximal valve and the other one is the distal valve. The upper one is called as the proximal valve, and the one which is farther away from the heart, which is shown in the down part of the leg, is called as the distal valve. So when you are standing at rest, both the venous valve, that is the proximal valve and the distal valve are open and the blood flows upwards towards the heart. This is shown in the picture 1. In the second picture, it shows the contraction of the leg muscles. Like when you stand up on the toes, that is the tip toes, or take a step, this compresses the vein. The compression pushes the blood through the proximal valve, an action called as milking. At the same time, the distal valve in the uncompressed segment of the vein closes as some blood is pushed against it. People who are immobilized through injury or disease lack these contraction of the leg muscles. As a result, their venous return is slower and they may develop circulatory problem. The third picture shows the muscle during relaxation. So during the muscle relaxation, when the feet is at the normal position, the pressure falls in the veins that has been previously compressed, which causes the proximal valve to close. Now the distal valve opens because the blood pressure in the foot is higher than in the leg, and the veins filled with the blood from the foot. Similar to the skeletal muscle pump, the respiratory pump also works in a similar manner, and it is based on the alternating compression and decompression of the vein. So what happens during inhalation, the diaphragm moves downwards. So this causes a decrease in the pressure in the thoracic cavity, and there is an increase in the pressure in the abdominal cavity. So what happens, the abdominal veins are compressed and there is a greater volume of blood moving from the compressed abdominal veins into the decompressed thoracic veins and then into the right atrium. When the pressure reverses during exhalation, the valves in the veins prevent the backflow of blood from the thoracic veins to the abdominal veins. The next factor affecting the blood pressure is the velocity of the blood flow. So the velocity of the blood or the speed of the blood is measured in centimeters per second and is inversely related to the cross-sectional area of the blood vessel. The velocity is lowest where the total cross-sectional area is greatest, and it is highest where the diameter is smaller. The blood pressure becomes slower and slower or reduces as the blood flows from the heart into the arteries and then into the arterioles, capillaries and venules and veins. When the bigger artery branches, the smaller arteries have a very small cross sectional area and than the original artery. So the blood flow becomes slower and slower as the blood moves away from the heart, and it is very slow or slowest in the capillaries. Similarly, when the venules unite to form veins, the cross sectional area of the veins become bigger and the flow becomes faster. The cross-sectional area of the aorta is only 3 to 5 square centimeter. So the average velocity of the blood here it is 40 seconds per centimeter per second, whereas the total cross-sectional area of all the capillaries is 4,500 to 6,000 square centimeter. So the velocity of blood flow in the capillaries is less than 0.1 centimeter per second, whereas in the two vena cava combined the cross-sectional area is about 14 square centimeter and the velocity is about 15 centimeter per second. Thus the velocity of the blood flow decreases as blood flows from the aorta to the arteries and to the arterioles and to the capillaries, and the velocity of the blood increases as it leaves the capillaries and returns to the heart through the venules and the veins. The relatively slow rate of flow through the capillaries aids the exchange of materials between the blood and the interstitial fluid. Circulation time is the time required for a drop of blood to pass from the right atrium through the pulmonary circulation back to the left atrium through the systemic circulation down to the foot and back again to the right atrium. In a resting person, circulation time is normally about 1 minute. This picture shows the summary of the factors that increases the blood pressure. So the cardiac output is influenced by the factors like the heart rate and the stroke volume. So the cardiac output is obtained by multiplying the heart rate and the stroke volume. When there is an increased heart rate or when there is an increased stroke volume, it will result in increasing the cardiac output. The venous return of the blood to the heart is increased by increase in the blood volume or the increase in the working of the skeletal muscle pump, respiratory pump and also the venoconstriction. So when there is an increased venous return, this will in turn increase the stroke volume. Similarly, the heart rate is influenced by the sympathetic and the parasympathetic stimulation. When there is decreased parasympathetic impulses and increased sympathetic stimulation, and also some of the hormones of the adrenal medulla will cause an increase in the heart rate. So when there is an increased heart rate and stroke volume, this will result in the increase of the cardiac output and also the increase in the mean arterial pressure. At the same time, the systemic vascular resistance is influenced by the factors like blood viscosity, the total length of the blood vessel, and also the vessel radius or the vasoconstriction. When there is increased number of RBC, just in the case like polycythemia, will result in in increasing the viscosity of the blood. Similarly, in an obese person, when the body size is increased, this will result in the increase in the of the total, length of the blood vessel in the whole body. So, when there is increased blood viscosity and increased total length of the blood vessel, this will result in increased systemic vascular resistance. So, the vasoconstriction also will lead to increase in the systemic vascular constriction. When there is increased vascular constriction, the blood pressure also increases. So, this will lead to the increase in the mean arterial pressure. There are some factors that control the blood pressure and the flow of blood. So these factors are form a negative feedback system and control the blood pressure by adjusting the heart rate, stroke volume, systemic vascular resistance, and the blood volume. This picture shows the role of the cardiovascular center in regulating the blood. The cardiovascular center is present in the medulla oblongata, as you can see from the picture, and it helps regulate the heart rate and stroke volume. This center also controls the neural, hormonal, and local negative feedback system that regulate the blood pressure and blood flow to the specific tissues. The cardiovascular center is shown as a violet colored structure in the picture. There are a group of neurons scattered within this cardiovascular center that regulate the heart rate, contractility, that is the force of contraction of the ventricles, and the diameter of the blood vessel. Some neurons stimulate the heart, that is the heart centers. They are called as the cardiostimulatory center. Other have an inhibitory effect. Some others can control the diameter of the blood vessel by causing vasoconstriction or vasodilation. These neurons which are present in the cardiovascular center are collectively called as vasomotor center. Now the cardiovascular center receives input from both the higher regions of the brain and from the sensory receptors. So there are nerve impulses that descend from the cerebral cortex, limbic system, and hypothalamus to affect the cardiovascular center. Apart from the higher centers of the brain, there are three main types of sensory receptors that provide input to the cardiovascular center. They are the proprioceptors, baroreceptors, and chemoreceptors. Proprioceptors monitor the movement of the joints and muscles, and they provide the input to the cardiovascular center during physical activity. Whereas baroreceptors monitor the changes in the pressure and the stretch which happens in the walls of the blood vessels. Chemoreceptors are those receptors which monitor the concentration of various chemicals in the blood. Output from the cardiovascular center flows along the sympathetic and the parasympathetic neurons of the autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic impulses reach the heart via the cardiac accelerator nerves. When there is an increase in the sympathetic stimulation, it increases the heart rate and contractibility. When there is a decrease in the sympathetic stimulation, it decreases the heart rate and contractibility. The parasympathetic stimulation is conveyed along the vagus 10th nerve, and this will result in the decrease of the heart rate. The opposing sympathetic stimulatory sympathetic neuron and the inhibitory parasympathetic neuron will have its own influence on the heart. The cardiovascular center also sends continuous impulses to the smooth muscles present in the blood vessels via the vasomotor nerves. These sympathetic neurons travel through the spinal cord, through all the thoracic and the one or two lumbar spinal nerves, and then pass into the sympathetic trunk ganglia. From there, these impulses are propagated along the sympathetic neurons that innervate the blood vessels in the viscera and the peripheral areas. Then the signals are passed on to the arterioles throughout the body, especially those of the skin and the abdominal viscera. So this will result in a in vasoconstriction called as a vasomotor tone that will set the resting level of the systemic vascular resistance. Systemic stimulation of the most of the veins causes constriction of the blood vessel, and it will result in the increase in blood pressure. There are two other factors or reflexes that will regulate the blood pressure. Number one is the baroreceptor reflexes, and the other one is the chemoreceptor reflexes. So, what are baroreceptor reflexes? Baroreceptors are pressure sensitive sensory receptors which are located in the aorta, the internal carotid arteries, and other large arteries in the neck and the chest. They send impulses to the cardiovascular center, which will help in the regulation of the blood pressure. So the two important baroreceptor reflexes are the carotid sinus reflex and the aortic reflex. This particular picture shows the innervation of the autonomic nervous system in the heart and the baroreceptor reflexes that helps in the regulation of blood pressure. The baroreceptors are present in the wall of the carotid sinus, and this will initiate the carotid sinus reflex which will help in the regulation of the blood pressure. So the carotid sinuses, you can see they are small widenings of the right and left internal carotid arteries which are seen just above the point where they branch from the common carotid artery. So blood pressure stretches the wall of the carotid sinus and they stimulate the baroreceptors. Nerve impulses propagate from the carotid sinus baroreceptors over the sensory axons in the glossopharyngeal ninth nerve to the cardiovascular center in the medulla oblongata. The baroreceptors which are present in the wall of the ascending aorta and the arch of the aorta initiate the aortic reflex. This will regulate the blood pressure, and the nerve impulses from the aortic baroreceptors reach the cardiovascular center via the sensory axons of the vagus 10th nerve. When there is a fall in the blood pressure, the baroreceptors are stretched less, so they send the nerve impulses at a much slower rate to the cardiovascular center. So, in response to this stimulus, the cardiovascular center decreases the parasympathetic stimulation of the heart and increases the sympathetic stimulation of the heart via the cardiac accelerator nerve. The increased sympathetic stimulation also will lead to the increased secretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine by the adrenal medulla. Now, as the heart beats faster and more forcefully, and the systemic vascular resistance also increases, cardiac output and the systemic vascular resistance rise, and the blood pressure increases to normal level. When there is an increase in the blood pressure, this is detected. When there is an increase in the blood pressure, this is also detected by the baroreceptors, and they will send a fast. The baroreceptors also will sense the increase in the blood pressure, and it will send a much faster impulse to the CV center. The CV center immediately responds by increasing the parasympathetic stimulation and decreasing the sympathetic stimulation. So this will result in the decrease of the heartbeat and the cardiac output. The CV center also slows the rate at which it sends sympathetic impulses along the vasomotor neurons that usually causes the vasoconstriction. So when it slows the rate at which it sends the sympathetic impulses, it will result in vasodilation, and this will further result in the lowering of the systemic vascular resistance. So decreased cardiac output and decreased systemic vascular resistance both will lower the systemic arterial pressure and bring the high blood pressure to a normal level. The baroreceptors also senses the change in the pressure when a person changes his position from a lying down position to an erect standing position. The baroreceptors quickly counteract the drop in the pressure, and they operate more slowly than normal, especially in the elder persons when they are shifting their position either from the lying down position or the standing position. This picture shows the negative feedback regulation of blood pressure via the baroreceptor reflexes. When there is a decrease in the blood pressure, what happens? It is immediately sensed by the baroreceptors. So the baroreceptors which are present in the arch of the aorta and the carotid arteries are stretched less when there is a drop in the blood pressure. This will result in the conduction of the impulses to the CV centers of the medulla oblongata. There is a decreased rate of nerve impulses that is transported or transmitted to the control centers of the medulla oblongata, and the adrenal medulla, that is the cardiovascular center, receives decreased nervous impulses. So as a result, the cardiovascular centers of the brain will send increased sympathetic stimulation and decreases the parasympathetic stimulation. They also will increase the secretion of the epinephrine and norepinephrine from the medulla oblongata. So this will result in the effectors, that is the stroke volume is increased and the heart rate is also increased. So when these two are increased, it will lead to the increase in the cardiac output. At the same time, the blood vessels constrict and it increases the systemic vascular resistance. So the increased cardiac output and the increased systemic vascular resistance will increase the blood pressure. So this increased blood pressure immediately acts as a feedback regulation, and this will immediately return the homeostasis to the normal level and bring the blood pressure to normal. Chemoreceptors are also sensory receptors just like the baroreceptors, and they detect or monitor the chemical composition of the blood. So they are located close to the baroreceptors of the carotid sinus and arch of the aorta in small structures called as the carotid bodies and the aortic bodies. These chemoreceptors detect the changes of the oxygen, carbon dioxide and the H plus ion concentration in the blood. When there is hypoxia, that is lower availability of oxygen or increased H plus ion concentration, that is acidosis, or excess carbon dioxide present in the blood, that is hypercapnia, these changes are detected by the chemoreceptors of the heart and they send the stimulus to the cardiovascular centers of the brain. The cardiovascular center increases the sympathetic stimulation to the arterioles and the veins, and they will result in the vasoconstriction and an increase in blood pressure. These chemoreceptors also have an influence in the respiratory centers of the brain, and this will stimulate the increase or decrease of the heartbeat and also the rate of breathing. Apart from the baroreceptors and the chemoreceptors, there are several hormones that will help in the regulation of the blood pressure and the blood flow by altering the cardiac output, and also by changing the systemic vascular resistance or adjusting the total volume of the blood. This table shows the different hormones that regulate the blood pressure. The different hormones that regulate the blood pressure are norepinephrine, epinephrine, angiotensin, antidiuretic hormone, nitric oxide, atrial natriuretic peptide, aldosterone, antidiuretic hormone, and the other factors. They influence the cardiac output, systemic vascular resistance, and also the blood volume. So what is the role of the renin-angiotensin aldosterone system? So when the blood volume falls or the blood flow to the kidney decreases, the juxtaglomerular cells of the kidneys secrete renin into the bloodstream. Renin from the kidney and the angiotensin converting enzyme from the lungs act on the substrate to produce the active hormone angiotensin 2, which raises the blood pressure in two ways. First, the angiotensin 2 is a potent vasoconstrictor and it raises the blood pressure by increasing the systemic vascular resistance. Second, it stimulates the secretion of aldosterone, which increases the reabsorption of sodium ions and water by the kidneys. The water reabsorption increases the total blood volume, and so it increases the blood pressure. What is the role of epinephrine and norepinephrine? So the sympathetic stimulation will increase the secretion of epinephrine and the norepinephrine from the adrenal medulla. These hormones increase the cardiac output by increasing the rate of heart contraction. They also cause vasoconstriction of the arterioles and the veins in the skin and the abdominal organs, and also the vasodilation of the arterioles in the cardiac and the skeletal muscles. This will help in the increase of the blood flow to the muscles during exercise. When there is dehydration or decreased blood flow, the hormone called as antidiuretic hormone is produced by the hypothalamus, which is released by the posterior pituitary. The ADH hormone causes vasoconstriction and thereby increasing the blood pressure. That is the reason they are called as the vasopressin. Atrial natriuretic peptide is another hormone that is released by the cells of the atria of the heart, and it lowers the blood pressure by causing vasodilation and by promoting the loss of salt and water in the urine. This also reduces the blood volume. The normal circulation is checked by certain terms called as pulse and the pulse pressures. What is the pulse? The alternate expansion and recoiling of the elastic arteries after each systole of the left ventricles creates a travelling pressure wave, which is called as the pulse. The pulse is felt strongest in the arteries closest to the heart and becomes weaker in the arterioles and disappears almost in the capillaries. The pulse may be felt in any artery that lies near the surface of the body and can be compressed against a bone or other firm structures. The location and structure of the different pulse points are shown in the table. There are different pulse points called as the superficial temporal artery, facial artery, common carotid artery and brachial artery. So they are located, the superficial temporal artery is located in the orbit of the eye, lateral to the orbit of the eye. The facial artery is located at the mandible on a line with the corners of the mouth. Common carotid artery is located lateral to the larynx, and the brachial artery is located the medial side of the biceps brachii muscle. So the different pulse points are shown in the picture. The superficial temporal artery, you can see the facial artery, the common carotid artery, the brachial artery and the radial artery of the hand, and the femoral artery and the popliteal artery on the legs. There is also a dorsal artery of the foot. So these are the different pulse points where the pulse can be felt. The pulse rate is the same as the heart rate, about 70 to 80 beats per minute at rest. So tachycardia is a condition where there is a rapid resting heart rate or pulse rate over, that is 100 beats per minute, and brachycardia is a slow resting heart or pulse rate under 50 beats per minute. What is blood pressure and how it can be measured? The term blood pressure refers to the pressure in the arteries generated by the left ventricle during systole and the pressure remaining in the arteries when the ventricle is in the relaxed state, that is the diastole. Blood pressure is usually measured in the brachial artery in the left arm. The device used to measure the blood pressure is called as the sphygmomanometer. The sphygmomanometer records the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure of a person. The normal blood pressure of an adult male is less than 120 mm mercury systolic and less than 80 mm mercury diastolic. There is another term called as the shock. Shock is the failure of the cardiovascular system to deliver enough oxygen and nutrients to the cells to meet their metabolic needs. There are different causes for shock and they may be different and varied, but all are characterized by inadequate blood flow to the body tissues. With inadequate oxygen delivery, cells switch from the aerobic state to the anaerobic state of production of ATP, and lactic acid accumulates in the body fluids. If shock persists, cell and organs become damaged and they may die due to the if the proper treatment is not given. Shock can be classified into four types. Number one is the hypovolemic shock when there is a decreased blood volume. Number two is the cardiogenic shock because of the poor heart function. Number three is the vascular shock due to inappropriate vascular vasodilation. And fourth one is the obstructive shock due to the obstruction of the blood flow. This picture shows the negative feedback system that can restore the normal blood pressure during the hypovolemic shock. When there is a hypovolemic shock and lesser volume of blood, it disrupts the homeostasis by decreasing the blood volume and the blood pressure. These are detected by the baroreceptors and the of the kidney and the baroreceptors of the heart. So the kidneys will start secreting increased amount of renin, which will lead to the increased concentration of angiotensin II in the blood. At the same time, the baroreceptors of the heart will decrease the rate of nervous impulses to the control centers of the hypothalamus and pituitary, and the cardiovascular centers of the medulla oblongata, which will result in the secretion of antidiuretic hormone in the blood and increased sympathetic stimulation and hormones from the adrenal medulla. Increase of angiotensin II in the blood will lead to increased secretion of aldosterone, which will increase the reabsorption of salt and water by the kidneys. At the same time, the ADH and the other sympathetic nervous system will lead to constriction of the blood vessel and increase in the heart rate and contractibility of the blood vessels. So this will totally increase the blood volume and also the systemic vascular resistance, and also retains the blood pressure. When the blood volume and the systemic vascular resistance and blood pressure increases, it will bring the homeostasis back to normal and maintain the normal status of the blood volume and the pressure. Thank you. In the next part, we will see about the circulatory routes, that is the systemic circulation, hepatic portal circulation, and the pulmonary circulation.